Alright, so before I get into this next part of this retrospective, and hopefully the last considering how long it takes me to make one of these, I want to correct some problems from my last video. Mostly so you wimps can stop crying to me about how I forgot to put an extra spike of hair on my Dan Kuso body pillow. That was artistic liberties and you shitheads just can't understand true art. Sorry. To begin with, Shun's mom did actually die of an unknown anime disease in the original Japanese show. I didn't know that. Second, Yugi did lose more than one time genuinely, and I didn't know how I could have forgotten the first duel after Yugi fights Kaiba, that being the one with Pegasus. Pegasus did still cheat to win, so that's only really a technicality for me. Yugi's losses to Rebecca and Joey don't count for me because he forfeited those when he could have easily won but just chose not to. Third, Time Wizard failed Joey in his fight with Bones. Fourth, I didn't mention Shun was in the new Bakugan series, and that's because I didn't know this guy was Shun until the video was already made. If I had known, I would have made a whole section as to why this guy doesn't deserve the name Shun Kazami, but he did such a good job not being Shun, I just couldn't find the time in my schedule of the first video to talk about this guy. Will he be mentioned in this new video? Most likely not, because I'm done with that terrible reboot for now. And finally, a bunch more people played Pac-Man Party than I had anticipated. That's my bad, Pac-Man Party community, shame on me. With that out of the way, let's get into the part 2 of a retrospective on a show about balls and teenagers throwing them on trading cards. I am shocked. That's the best expression I can have for how well my original Bakugan Retrospective video did. In the beginning, I thought it was dead in the water, but after a while, it became one of my most recognizable videos, and I'm kinda perfectly fine with that. I worked for weeks putting my evidence together for that damn thing, and seeing people in the comments like, "Hey man, this is a cool video. By the way, can I have a picture of your feet?" brings a tear of both joy and remorse to my face. I was honestly shocked at just how many people remembered this basically dead until a few months ago toy brand with an anime series attached. I was even more surprised at the amount of comments asking me to take a look at the second season because of how much better it apparently was than the first. To have so many people be more excited for me to make a part 2 talking about Bakugan is like asking a kid on the day after Christmas, "Yeah, Billy, that was a fun holiday where I spent your college savings to get you that new pony, but you know what? How about I get you that life-size Transformer you've been asking about? I'll just have to sell the house and we can live there the rest of our lives." You couldn't have given me a topic I wanted to talk about more with such demand. I watched through another 52 full episodes, which for you kids who failed arithmetic is as follows. With a grand total of 52 episodes of about 20 minutes each, multiplying those two together gives us 1,040 minutes. Divide that by 60 minutes per hour, and we're left with 17 hours and 20 minutes of Bakugan. That's about 2/3 of a full day. I spent a lot of free time on this and wouldn't change a thing, so without further ado, I present to you the Bakugan Retrospective Part 2, the less popular one. Oh, and watch the original video, cause it gives me more ads, and you might want to be in the loop. When we left off, Dan and Co all said goodbye to their Bakugan as they ascended into the sky towards New Vestroia, a home where they can live in peace and harmony forever. Can you guess what happens to start off the second season? Is the harmony disrupted? The harmony is disrupted! As it turns out, Bakugan didn't only appear on Earth, that they also appeared in this other dimension on the planet Vestal. What's the difference between a human and a Vestal? Well, other than having a fashion sense entirely reliant on shoulder pads and hair care product, they're much more technologically advanced. And as we all know, anything that's technologically advanced is bad, and probably wants to kill you. When Bakugan fall to their world, they immediately turned into a sport, thinking the Bakugan are just mindless beasts. Eventually they arrive at New Vestroia through dimension hopping, and using a special machine implanted in their cities, which are like UFOs but bigger and with a sandy squirrel dome, they return Bakugan to ball form. Their plan in the beginning, they being the head of the Vexels, in the beginning is to take Bakugan and harness their power while studying them. Meanwhile on Earth, nothing really happens other than typical teen stuff in Japan. Then Drago regains a form, comes over to Earth, and basically tells Dan, "Man, I'm getting the band back together. Let's go on another interdimensional adventure without telling your parents and leave those girls behind." I'm not joking, that's basically what happens. Marucho also tags along because he wants a piece of that Baku pie action too. Once they get to New Vestroia, Dan, Marucho, and Drago are introduced to the leader of the Resistance to free Bakugan Mira, and to make a long story short, they and the other Resistance members Baron and Ace team up to thwart the plans of the Vexos, the top soldiers of the Vestal army who know about the Bakugan sentience, the Vestal Prince Hydron, and the King Zenaheld. I know what you're thinking, could these names get any goofier? Well, how about Spectre Phantom? Shadow Prove? Volt Luster. Okay, I'll stop. Mira, Baron, and Ace coincidentally fill in the attributes the gang was missing to have a full elemental circle other than Ventus. Jeez, I wonder how we're gonna fill that hole, guys. Oh wow, Shun's here now. How How unexpected, guys, wow. I guess with the basic premise of the season explained, I should begin going into further detail about certain aspects like the I need to get into the fundamentals of the story and how the battles work now, because if I don't, I assure you, you'll be confused at something. I noticed a few fans didn't like my comparing Bakugan to Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh!, so lucky for you, I'm not going to be doing anything like that in this new video. Not due to your comment or anything, more so because this season is where every new episode gets so damn bananas I couldn't compare it to another anime if I tried. To put it in basic terms, the King of the Vestals, King Zinaheld, changes his plan about as often as Gargamel does with the Smurfs. First, he wants to harness the power of all the Bakugan on New Vestroia. Then he wants to use the power of the ancient Bakugan to power a machine to destroy all other natural Bakugan to pave way for his mechanical ones. Then he wants to destroy the universe with his Star Destroyer Bakugan called the Alternative. Then he wants to eat the Bakugan. Then he wants to turn the Bakugan into gold. To go through the entire season in an overly long paragraph, Dan and friends meet up with the Resistance and plan to destroy all the Dimension controllers in each Vestal city on New Vestroia. The controllers keep Bakugan in ball form and can be destroyed by being overloaded with too much battling. They need to fight off against the Vexos Spectre, Gus, Mylene, Shadow, Volt, and Link while going through all this. During that time, they fight the Vexos multiple times. Dan and a few of the Resistance members come back to Earth because, well, you see, Runa was trying to help Dan fight against the Vexos by going to fight, but she ended up getting stuck in between dimensions because Dr. Michael's dimension portal didn't entirely work, so she needed the help of the Resistance to get back to another dimension portal that would be closing soon. So when they got there, the Vexos also jumped in, so then the Resistance jumped in to go after them, and that's what happened. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. The Vexos who go into the portal are Link, Spectre, and Gus, whereas the Resistance members who go in are Baron, Dan, and Mira. When they reach Earth, Spectre kidnaps Runo, but then lets her go to show he and Gus actually like the Bakugan unlike the other Vexos. Link is left alone after Gus and Spectre disappear, leading to him gaining a sort of affection for Alice, whom he's allowed to stay with for the time being on Earth. Considering his character, he would later go on to betray her. Mira fights Spectre to find out he's her brother that she thought was dead. Spectre takes Drago after beating Dan and tries to use Drago's perfect core to take over, nearly killing him, and while this is all going on, the rest of the Resistance back on New Vestroia is one by one separated, fought, and taken hostage after they're beaten. Things are not looking good for the Resistance. The fact that Mira betrays the Resistance for a while to be with Spectre doesn't really help either, but then she betrays him to give Dan the pieces to form Max's Dragonoid and free the Resistance members, so I guess it's cool. To put that in perspective, Max's Dragonoid is Drago, covered in a mech suit made of other Bakugan. How much more ridiculous can one show get? How about Spectre uses his backup pieces to make Max's Helios and fight Dan on the Vestal Palace while the others are inside trying to free the main Bakugan from before who were frozen as bronze statues in the prince's room. As the prince realizes the fight to take New Vestroia is definitely lost, he blows up his own base with Spectre and Dan on it, planning to blame Spectre for everything that's happened. They both survive along with the OG Bakugan squad and leave the battlefield, ready to fight another day. That's the end of the first half of New Vestroia. You better be taking notes, I ain't repeating this. The second half begins with the Vestal King Zinaheld fighting all the ancient Bakugan warriors from the first season for their elemental energies, basically all the power of one element in a single place. He's able to defeat them with his massively overpowered mechanical Bakugan Farbros, but before he can take the energies to power his machine to destroy all natural Bakugan, they give their powers to our main protagonist so they can evolve. With the Prince Hydron becoming one of the Vexos in place of Gus and Spectra, he and the other Vexos begin going after the Resistance members one by one for their elemental energies. I should also mention that at this point, the Resistance are considered the good guys, who reveal the truth to the Vestal people about the Bakugan sentience, while the Vexos, the Prince, and the King are all hacks who fled the planet because they didn't want to face judgment. Many more battles are had, some Resistance members lose their elements, some keep them, but while this is happening, the spear to destroy Bakugan lands in New Vestroia, ready to be activated with the elements and already changing Bakugan back to ball form. Dan beats Spectre in a battle to find out where their secret base, the Mother Palace, is, the place containing the elements that have already been collected, and the Resistance is put at a deliberate disadvantage. Basically, the field can make it so the power levels of each Bakugan stay basic, so the mechanical Bakugan always win for having slightly higher base powers. All the elements end up being collected, so Drago takes the bomb with the elemental power in it, flies up into the air with it, and absorbs all the the energy in the bomb to gain another evolution. This is a bit of a cop-out, but you know, whatever. Spectre turns to the side of good because he realizes he can't keep up with Dan and Drago to try and make the most powerful Bakugan ever made, and Zenaheld creates one last-ditch effort to win. As he tries to get the project called the Alternative working, the Vexos begin leaving. First Volt, then Link, then Mylene and Shadow just die. Hydron tries to stand up to his father, and guess what? He ends up losing and is thrown in jail. The entire Resistance trains and then fights against the Alternative, and is able to destroy it by blowing it up from the inside. The end of the season is set up for the next one with new characters and new experiences to be had. Oh, and also Marucho reads Spectre's mail.
Hold on, Keith, I'm reading your mail.
Marucho, no, that's a federal offense. God damn it, you were supposed to be the smart one with the anime glasses. How are we supposed to defeat the Vexos from a prison cell? God damn it. This season's story was affected in part due to the changed battle system, and I mean they really changed the battle system. Instead of winning by getting 3 victories against your opponent, each person has a life gauge of 500 that's lowered by however many points higher the opponent's power is if they win. Another rule of the life gauge is if you win by more than 500 in a single battle, the Bakugan that lost is given to the winner. That's how Spectre got Drago for a short time to try and harness his unique power. How the Bakugan are thrown and interact with each other can actually affect how they open up, or if they don't even open up right at all. It's sort of like how they did it in the video games, and that's also how people get the advantage sometimes, and I think it's a good touch because someone would probably try to do that. We all have that one friend, you know the one. With their new gauntlets that every brawler needs to have now, they can activate multiple abilities at once to create various combos and cause some true devastation. That makes it easier to watch the characters have single Bakugan they always battle with. They get new abilities on occasion and can combine them with fighting opponents. The fact the main cast gets evolutions halfway through doesn't hurt either. Since battles take place in fields and valleys rather than the same empty space, there's more possibility for creative ability card usage. Since gate cards are now field wide, they don't need to stay in the same place the whole battle. In fact, we get some really fun kaiju action, and with all these massive explosions and general mayhem across the entire battlefield, sometimes the players get incapacitated or hurt thanks to the environment changes or just getting caught up in the battle. They even introduced 2 new types of Bakugan to aid in fighting. The Trap Bakugan, to put it basically, is an assistant to the regular ones. They add shields or help increase power of attacks, maybe combined with the other Bakugan to make this unstoppable beast of a machine. It's really cool to see sometimes. They were never just in ball form, they were always either triangles or squares or rectangles, and that was probably so they could sell more toys, but I like it all nonetheless. It definitely distinguishes them from regular Bakugan. The other accessory was armor specific Bakugan could have to increase their power and make room for new abilities. Like, look at this dragon, he could put a machine gun on his back. What? Oh my god, the action, These were pretty cool both on the show and as toys. I love messing around and mixing them up with different Bakugan. It surely added to the fights. Really, the action itself has improved tons from the first season. Animation. This is probably the highlight of the new season. The animation looks good, and at some point spectacular. I guess with all that money they made, the crew was allowed a bigger budget per episode to make some more quality entertainment. Animation was more of a crutch for the original season, with changing proportions and Bakugan that, while stylized, looked pretty clunky in movement. There's none of that here. All the 2D animation looks really smooth, the characters have even better looking designs than before, and they've decided to add more 3D into the mix. The Vexos have mechanical Bakugan, so to show that visually, they made all mechanical Bakugan entirely CGI. You'd usually be right in assuming that'd be a terrible idea for multiple reasons on the average show, but for Bakugan, it turned out pretty well in the end. The designs never looked too stiff or out of place in the scene, and I'm impressed with what they were able to accomplish sometimes. Hydron's Bakugan looks pretty good, and has moments where it looks just exceptionally made. I wish I could find the show's production budget, because this looks pretty good, especially in comparison to the first season. The Bakugan are all CGI when they're in ball form as well. No longer do we have any of those weird shots where a Bakugan is zoomed out slightly and then looks like a blob of their former selves. They may have had the same idea of Bakugan in CG when they're in balls for the first season, but I don't think it was ever this smooth and glossy and well detailed in the first. For that better animation though, a good bit of it is reused. I understand why. With great animation comes a great weakness. I just thought it was worth pointing out, and at that, animation doesn't mean anything if you can't relate to or like the characters, which brings me to my main section of this video. Characters! We already know about our main 3 boys, Dan, Marucho, and Shun, plus they retain about the same personality, so if they have any major changes, I'll mention it later. With our new 3 main protagonists, I gotta say, I approve the choice in removing their first season counterparts. Not that I don't like Bruno, Julie, and Alice, far from it. I find them all rather entertaining and can hold their own for their center episodes. You do have to admit though, they weren't exactly the most complex characters. Julie's big conflict was having an inferiority complex because her sister was better at stuff. Bruno had to come to terms with her liking Dan, and while Alice in concept is cool, having a split personality of a villain and a friend, she herself wasn't very interesting. Then we have Dan with his complex relationship with Drago, Shun having to deal with the loss of his mother who meant so much to him and gave him his main Bakugan, and Marucho having to deal with the fact that his parents wanted him to do so much that it overworked him and changed him into somewhat of a drone. It's kinda clear who the more interesting characters are and why they decided to keep them. Maybe it was because she was busy being Masquerade most of the time and much more charming at that, but we didn't really see Alice much in the original series until near the end where she faces Masquerade and realizes he's just a part of her. Slapping her in the background isn't really gonna change the dynamic too much, let's just be real. No need to worry if you do like those characters anyway, they appear much more than I remembered in the series whenever the gang heads back to Earth. They still get plenty of screen time. Moving on to the new characters, Mira is probably the most interesting. She's the leader of the Resistance and daughter of the head of researchers for the Vestals. She was only able to find out the Bakugan were sentient because she saw one of the original 6 being experimented on and clearly being hurt. It not only gives us a feel for why she'd start the Resistance, knowing her father was doing this without telling her, but we're also able to get a similar feeling because the Bakugan being experimented on is our boy Hydronoid, who we later see with the originals other than Drago encased in bronze as statues. Mira is constantly trying to get her father to come back with her, but he's so enthralled in his work that he can't see what's happening with his family life. Mira also has a dead brother who, guess what, isn't dead, which gives her another reason to fight because she wanted to try and find him because she didn't know for sure what really happened to him. And wow, most obvious shocker in the entire series, it was the main antagonist all along. That's never been done before, but in all seriousness, I do kind of like how they didn't wait to reveal this twist as if it was something special, but instead choose to let the characters it matters to know and face the issues that would come with that. After Mira finds out, she's always on the edge of questioning her brother's motives and second guessing what to do. It's a fun conflict. In the end, she tries to change him by joining the Vexos and battling him, but she kinda loses, so she betrays them and goes back to the good boys. Another correction of mine is the Maxis armor was a thing by the middle of the series rather than the end, but it does show up in the end, so whatever. Mira is really just a competent character who's still likable on screen even when she's betraying our main boys. She isn't the first Resistance member introduced though, Baron is. He's fighting Spectre with Tigrera and loses badly. This gives a few details about his character and what we're going to be expecting from the show almost immediately. He loses a character that was so important to the first season in the first few minutes despite trying his best. He clearly feels tons of guilt about it, but is unable to do anything thanks to his clear absence of skills to defeat Spectre. He is 12 years old after all. Yep, that's the body of a 12-year-old boy, definitely. And I thought Giorno was stretching it when he took over the biggest Italian mob at 15. Anyway, throughout the series, we got to see him develop as a character. He by far has the worst record of any of the Resistance members. Like, he loses a ton, but through those losses, he grows and becomes more mature and fleshed out as a character. One of his first episodes is about overcoming his inferiority complex, not being able to save Tigrera, and realizing there was nothing he could do to save her at that point, but that he wants to improve that. He has a good motivation for fighting, wanting to protect his massive family. Then there's Ace. He's, cool. And emo. He's exactly like every girl I got rejected by in middle school. He even has the same haircut. There isn't much to his character. He's got some nice development, learning how after Mira beat him, he overcame his ego and decided to fight for something more. But other than that, he kind of makes some killer insults.
That would be funny to watch. Then who would train you, Dan?
Oh, Ace, you genius, smartass, you. Looking away from the protagonists, I think where this season shined highly over the first was the villains. I love these guys, even Link, who I like to call little shit in a Psyche K-wig. I'm truly shocked no one looked at my Halloween costume and thought I was Link from the Vexos in the incredibly fondly remembered second season of Bakugan Battle Brawlers. I mean, come on, I might as well have dressed as Jesus. The main villains from the original series were nothing to scoff at. I had tons to talk about Masquerade, but not so much Naga or Hal G. They were kinda just two-dimensional baddies. Then we have every other villain in Battle Brawlers, if you can even think of their names. Let's see, we have Chan Li, Billy, Vin Diesel, Manny Rivera, this guy? Yeah, this guy. Don't you remember him? Those weren't even half the list of all the villains in that season, but yeah, as you can see, there are a few too many villains to get any good development for all of them. The Vexos were all fun personalities, with memorable moments and battles with unique twists. The best guy to start with would be our very own Masquerade wannabe, Spectre Phantom. Spectre is shown early on to be both an incredibly powerful guy, always searching for more to power up his Bakugan Helios, and not even the most loyal to the group he leads. The thing is, he's not on the side of his sister's side either. Mira might be his sibling, but he never told her about becoming Spectre, about his search for power, or that he sort of became a different person than the one Mira knew. He showed midway through the series he wanted Mira to rule by his side, yet immediately stops caring about her after she goes back to the enemy. We never get to entirely know what he's really thinking because he purposely confuses the brawlers and the audience. He loses to Dan in his first battle on purpose with him to learn his moves, and then comes back to take Drago and harness the perfect core on him using forbidden cards, almost killing him. They actually use the word kill and die, and the fact that Dan is able to save him in the end doesn't make seeing Drago in pain any less unsettling. Other times, Spectre will follow Dan and go to Earth, kidnap Bruno, then just give her back to say he's a friend to the Bakugan. Halfway through the season, he isn't on either side fighting in the show. He fights for his own size. He wants to be the most powerful and rule over all the Bakugan as their leader. Whether he has to fight his own people or battle Dan with a laser sword, like he uses an ability card in his gauntlet to create a laser sword. That's kinda badass, not gonna lie. After becoming an outlaw among the Vestal people and losing to Drago one too many times, he eventually realizes he can't make Helios more powerful than Drago because Drago, both physically and spiritually, is always evolving to a point where he can't keep up, not even by mechanizing Helios. That's when he decides to take off his mask and finally join the good guys. He even helps Drago get some new battle gear. He may have done some evil shit, but in the end, he never went so far that he couldn't be redeemed. The next Vexos I want to talk about is Volt. Now, why Volt, JS? He looks basic as fuck. This haircut and color scheme screams strong, angry, dumb guy. What could he bring to the table? I actually thought that same way coming into this review. I could barely speak a word about the guy from my memories, and he didn't really even look like much. Then when I started watching, I got his character. He is the best boy of the Vexos, quote me on that. Other than Spectre, he hasn't got much competition. Volt is a noble fighter who stays true to his beliefs. If he weren't a Vexos, he'd probably be on the resistance side. It just so happens he was born into a kingdom of Bakugan abusers and stays loyal to it for his people. When he fights Marucho in the desert, he pulls Marucho out of a sand trap before fighting him. He easily could have left him for dead, but decides that he needs to fight in a battle to choose his fate. When he loses to Baron, he congratulates him on a good fight. After the Vexos all give up their regular Bakugan to get newer, mechanized versions, Volt is incredibly reluctant to give up his partner Brontes. After Gus, Spectre's right-hand man who joins him in revolting against the Vexos, comes across Brontes and the other discarded Bakugan, he forces them to evolve and lose their soul, as he puts it. Even after that happens, when Volt finds out, he tries his hardest to get Brontes back and still loses. After long enough, he decides to leave the Vexos entirely and is confronted by Hydron, the prince of the Vestals, who fights and loses to Volt, but he's butthurt because he can't win and throws an orbit Volt, opening a portal to the farthest reaches of the universe and sucking him in, never to be seen again. They got rid of my best boy, and I can never forgive the show for that. They basically killed him and put it in a different wording. It's implied. Oh, and whatever happened to Brontes? Well, after Gus beat Volt in a battle, he thought that Brontes had no more further use, so he just threw him in a desert. He was never to be found again. The show actually went there and basically just abandoned him. He has nowhere to be seen. Moving away from that incredible sadness, Link is a character that's always confused me. What I mean is, he has the ability to both annoy me and charm me at the same time. I'm not entirely sure what it is, but I can't seem to entirely hate the guy. He's intentionally a weaseless character who doesn't really have an alliance with anyone unless they're the winning side or the one that he thinks is going to win. First he's with the Vexos, then the King, then Spectre, then the King again, then Alice, then Spectre, then the King again, and then he comes back to Alice. And that's probably the best part of his character, the relationship with Alice. She brings Link in just because she feels sorry for him when he gets stuck on Earth. She still doesn't like him or want him to be there, but Link sees the gesture and actually breaks down crying when she isn't in the room. That's something rare for villains, let alone someone like Link. It showed he wasn't a soulless little overconfident shit, but actually a scared child who was just like the youngest of the Vexos. He's only 14, guys, come on. He betrays her to go back to Vestal, but in the end when he hears she's going to be blown up along with Earth, he risks everything to get the information about the alternative to her, despite them leaving on a really bitter note. Hydron shows up and beats Link, ending in him having the same fate as Volt, yet he never forgets about Alice and still finds a way to give her the information from beyond the grave. That's some determination, plus 10 good boy points for Link. Gus is kind of a different story. He's Spectre's lapdog. He's constantly referred to that and always talks about how, oh ho mortal, you'll never defeat Master Spectre. Spectre. He is the best in the universe. Why would Master Spectre accept your feeble challenge? He will be the king of the new world. Like, shut up, man. I can understand why Spectre cuts you off mid-sentence all the time. I get it. You want him to notice you. He does redeem himself a little near the end when he's presumed dead after trying to fight Xenaheld for Spectre and joining the good guy squad after he's discovered alive, but he's still not a great character. Seriously though, I unironically felt that when Gus and his Bakugan together were blown away by Xenaheld and presumed dead. I thought the show actually went there for a good few episodes. There isn't really much I can say about Shadow or Mylene. They're kinda just Saturday morning cartoon villains, memorable ones, but not the most deep. They showed they cared for each other when Shadow tries to help Mylene before they both were sucked into the death portal, that's really what it's called, and I can't say I didn't enjoy their time on screen. Now to talk about the later villains, Xenaheld and Hydron. Xenaheld is your typical ruler, obsessed with power, wants to rule the universe, is implied mentally and physically damaging on his son through his power, status, and punishing robots, the same kind of thing you'd see from a regular bad guy. Not much else to say. Hydron, on the other hand, is somewhat of a case study. He's the son of the king, and throughout the first half of the season is just constantly whining to Spectre and the other Vexos about getting Drago and beating the Resistance and getting him a glass of water because he's cranky, damn it. The second half of the season expands on him more. He becomes one of the Vexos to try and appease his father or make him proud. He's able to use his skills to defeat multiple brawlers at a faster rate than the Vexos, but his dad just gives him the cold shoulder every time. He even resorts to killing his fellow Vexos who decide to leave, but to no avail from his father. He gets Yoda illusions of the guys he took down, telling him to move on and become the next king, leaving Xenaheld in the dust. Obviously this isn't really happening, but Hydron is at such a low point. Getting any supportive words, even from his former allies, is enough to make him want to try and revolt against his dad. Xenaheld actually says something smart, saying Hydron will never be king material because even in trying to defeat him, he's only doing it to impress his father, always staying in the shadow rather than taking him on for Hydron's own glory. Hydron decides to help the Resistance after Gus gets him out of space jail and stops Xenaheld from escaping the exploding ship to stop him from continuing to carry out his plans. He self-sacrifices himself to save others, and I wasn't expecting that from someone like Hydron. It threw me for a bit of a loop. Altogether, Bakugan New Vestroia is a season on par with, and in many aspects even better than the original series. The animation remains nice looking even to this day, the characters are likable, and the new ones get even more development than the originals. The villains are much more memorable, and everyone but Spectre and Gus didn't end up joining the good guys because they all died. The story was much more unpredictable and added to the lore in the exact way a sequel should try to do. The battle system was improved and added upon from the original show, and overall, it truly shows the right way to make a second season. With both parts, I believe I've made about an hour of content around Bakugan, and as I said in the beginning, I wouldn't change it for the world. I loved working on this, and I hope you all enjoyed what I produced from it. I'm just signing off to sleep because I'm not going to be talking about part 3 or 4. You cannot make me. I won't do it!